There are people whose minds shine like sharpened blades. They can solve equations in seconds, analyze data with astonishing precision, and speak with a fluency that makes them seem untouchable. Yet when it comes to building a career, maintaining fulfilling relationships, or simply finding peace within themselves, many of these same people stumble. On the other hand, we often meet individuals who may not have extraordinary IQ scores or advanced degrees, but who walk into a room and immediately earn trust, ease tension, and inspire cooperation. What is it that sets them apart? The answer, as modern psychology and ancient wisdom both suggest, lies not in cognitive brilliance, but in emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, is often described as a soft skill, but its effects are anything but soft. It is the subtle force that shapes how we perceive ourselves, how we interact with others, and ultimately, how we navigate the unpredictable waves of life. While IQ can open doors, EQ determines whether those doors remain open. It is the bridge between knowledge and wisdom, between ambition and fulfillment. Think of it as a soft key that unlocks the doors IQ alone cannot open. Doors to trust, connection, and the kind of success that is measured not only in achievements, but also in inner peace. Imagine for a moment two young professionals beginning their careers. The first dazzles with raw intellect, answering every technical question with perfect accuracy. The second listens attentively, acknowledges the emotions in the room, and asks thoughtful questions that make colleagues feel understood. Over time, who rises higher? It is not always the one with sharper facts at hand, but the one who can connect, soothe, and inspire. This pattern repeats itself across workplaces, friendships, families, and even entire communities. The truth is, intelligence without emotional wisdom can feel cold, distant, and even brittle. It might win arguments, but it rarely wins hearts. And in the long game of life, hearts matter just as much as minds. This is why psychologists have found that EQ is often a stronger predictor of long-term success, resilience, and happiness than IQ. High IQ might get you hired, but high EQ gets you promoted and keeps your relationships intact along the way. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself. Think back to a moment when anger bubbled inside you after a harsh comment, or when disappointment tempted you to give up too soon. In those moments, what determined the outcome wasn't your ability to memorize facts or calculate probabilities. It was your ability to notice what you felt, pause, breathe, and choose a response. That instant, when you either lash out or take the higher path, is the crossroads where emotional intelligence proves its power. If you are listening right now, take a moment to notice how your own emotions rise and fall as I speak. Do you feel a touch of curiosity? Maybe a memory surfaces. Someone at work who always seems calm under pressure, or a friend who can sense your feelings without a word. That's the presence of emotional wisdom in action. It isn't magic. It isn't an accident. It's a set of skills. Skills that can be learned, practiced, and strengthened every single day. Before we dive into those skills, let me invite you into something small but important. Wherever you are listening right now, pause and reflect. What time is it? And where are you? Perhaps you are sitting in your living room after a long day, or listening in the quiet of early morning with coffee in hand. Share your moment in the comments below. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. And if this exploration already resonates with you, take a second to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another journey we share here at AudioBook Sanctuary. Now let's continue seamlessly. Emotional intelligence begins with a definition, yes, but more importantly, with a realization. It is not just about being nice or sensitive. It is about cultivating the wisdom to understand yourself and others in ways that logic alone cannot touch. EQ is noticing the subtle signals in a conversation, managing your impulses when emotions surge, and creating space where authentic connection can thrive. Throughout history, great leaders have demonstrated this quality long before science gave it a name. Consider Abraham Lincoln, who during the most divided period of American history often diffused anger in his cabinet with humor, empathy, and calm reflection. Or think of a teacher you once had, whose encouragement meant more to you than any lesson plan. These were not simply moments of intellect. They were moments of emotional wisdom at work. But let's not keep it abstract. Imagine standing in a heated argument. Words are sharp, voices rising, your body tightens, your pulse races. In that moment, emotional intelligence is not some distant theory. It is the ability to breathe, to choose not to mirror anger, but to redirect it. It is the voice inside that says, pause, ask, listen. And as you do, the storm begins to settle, and a path forward appears where before there was only conflict. This is why EQ often outshines IQ in the real world. IQ is about what you know. EQ is about what you do with what you know, especially when emotions are high and stakes are real. Without it, knowledge can become arrogance, and brilliance can alienate. With it, even ordinary knowledge becomes extraordinary in its impact. So as we begin this journey together, hold on to this truth. Emotional intelligence is not a luxury, but a necessity. It is not fixed, but flexible. And it is not separate from success, but at the very heart of it. And that brings us naturally to the next step. If EQ matters this much, what exactly builds it? What are its foundations, and how can we strengthen them? Psychologists point us toward 5 essential pillars, 5 skills that, when practiced, turn emotional wisdom into a daily reality. The first foundation of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, the ability to recognize your emotions as they arise and to name them with clarity. Picture a child who feels anger but cannot express it, so it explodes as a tantrum. Now picture an adult who feels that same anger, but insists, "I'm fine," while their tone sharpens and their jaw tightens. In both cases, the absence of awareness distorts the truth. Without noticing our inner landscape, emotions control us from the shadows. With awareness, however, emotions become signals, guiding us toward understanding and choice. Think of emotions as waves on an ocean. Some arrive softly, like ripples of mild curiosity. Others crash hard, like storms of rage or grief. If you are unaware, you may be swept away, tumbling under the current. But awareness allows you to stand at the shore, observing the tide, naming each wave as it arrives. This is frustration. This is hope. This is fear. By naming, you create distance, and in that distance lies power. The second foundation, closely tied to the first, is self-regulation. Once you can name a wave, you can decide whether to ride it, let it pass, or redirect its energy. Self-regulation is not suppression. It is not pretending emotions don't exist. It is the art of pausing before reacting. Imagine being in a tense meeting where criticism cuts deep. Your instinct might be to defend yourself instantly, perhaps sharply. But self-regulation whispers, breathe. Let the sting settle. Choose your response. The difference between reaction and response is the difference between conflict and growth. Of course, self-regulation is not easy. We live in a culture of speed where instant replies and hot takes are glorified. Yet wisdom often waits. Pausing for a single breath before speaking can transform the outcome of an entire conversation. Over time, this pause becomes a habit, and that habit becomes the invisible strength of emotionally wise people. The third pillar is motivation. true motivation is not about chasing approval or external rewards, but about cultivating an inner drive that persists despite setbacks. When you are guided by internal values, you can weather failures without losing direction. Think of athletes who train in the dark mornings when no one is watching, or artists who paint without expectation of fame. Their fuel is intrinsic. Emotional intelligence sustains motivation because it helps you align your actions with your deeper why. And when your actions and values match, resilience naturally follows. Motivation also requires optimism. Not blind optimism, but the ability to see setbacks as temporary and challenges as opportunities for growth. Imagine failing an exam, losing a client, or facing rejection. A mind focused only on IQ might say, "I calculated wrong. I am not good enough." But an emotionally intelligent mind says, "This setback teaches me something. I will adapt. I will try again." That subtle shift in perspective determines whether you spiral downward or rise stronger. Next is empathy, perhaps the most celebrated quality of EQ. Empathy is the ability to step outside your own skin and into another's world. It is listening not only to words, but to tone, silence, and body language. Have you ever had someone notice you were upset before you spoke a word? That was empathy at work. Empathy builds bridges where logic alone cannot reach. It softens conflict, deepens trust, and creates the invisible bonds that hold families, friendships, and communities together. But empathy is not only about kindness, it is also about courage. To truly empathize, you must be willing to feel the discomfort of another's pain without rushing to fix it or turn away. Sometimes, the most powerful act is simply to sit beside someone in silence, sharing the weight of their sorrow. Empathy doesn't always solve. Often it heals simply by saying, "I see you. I hear you. You are not alone." The final pillar is social skill, the ability to translate self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, and empathy into effective interaction. Social skill is not about charm or manipulation. It is about genuine connection. It is knowing when to speak and when to listen, how to encourage cooperation, and how to lead without domination. A leader with social skill inspires loyalty, not by demanding respect, but by earning it through presence, fairness, and care. Social skill is the art of weaving together all the other pillars into everyday life. For example, in a negotiation, self-awareness helps you track your own emotions. Self-regulation prevents rash words. Motivation keeps you focused. Empathy allows you to read the other person's perspective, and social skill ties it together into communication that creates agreement rather than division. In friendships, these same skills foster bonds that last decades. In families, they transform ordinary interactions into lessons of love and trust. Now let's draw this picture together. Emotional intelligence rests on 5 foundations: awareness of self, control of self, the fuel of motivation, the compassion of empathy, and the craft of social skill. Each of these is like a stone in a bridge. Alone, a stone may be solid, but incomplete. Together, they form the path that carries us from isolation toward connection, from confusion toward clarity, and from reaction toward wisdom. Perhaps the question you are asking yourself right now is this: can these pillars be built even if I have struggled with them before? The answer is yes. None of us are born fully emotionally wise. We learn by trial and error, by reflection and practice. Emotional intelligence is a lifelong journey, not a fixed score. And yet, knowing these 5 pillars is not enough. Life will test you in the moments you least expect, when anger rises suddenly, when conflict shakes the room, when stress pushes you toward breaking. That is when the true measure of EQ is revealed. To see how, we must step into those very moments and discover how to master our emotions when the world around us feels like it's falling apart. Tension has a way of sneaking into our lives without warning. A single word, a misinterpreted glance, or the weight of mounting responsibilities can spark emotions that feel overwhelming. In those moments, the true test of emotional intelligence begins. It is one thing to talk about awareness and self-control when life is calm. It is another to practice them in the middle of a storm. Picture yourself in a heated argument. Perhaps it's at work, where a colleague criticizes your project in front of others, or at home, where a loved one raises their voice over something that seems small but feels significant. Your chest tightens, heat rises in your face, and your mind races with comebacks. The impulse to defend, to fight, to lash out comes swiftly. This is the crossroads where EQ makes its entrance. Do you surrender to the wave, or do you step back and steer it? The first step is recognition. Notice what your body is telling you, the rapid heartbeat, the clenched jaw, the shallow breath. These are signals, not enemies. Instead of resisting them, acknowledge them. I feel anger rising. By naming it, you create a pause, however brief, between emotion and reaction. That pause is the crack in the door where wisdom can enter. The second step is breathing. It sounds deceptively simple, but deep, intentional breaths shift the body from a state of fight or flight to a state where reason can return. Count slowly. Inhale, hold, exhale. Even 2 or 3 cycles can lower the intensity enough for you to think clearly. Remember, in conflict, your goal is not to suppress emotion, but to channel it into something constructive. Think of emotions like fire. Left uncontrolled, fire can destroy. But with guidance, fire cooks food, warms homes, and forges metal. In the same way, anger can burn relationships, or when managed, it can spark change, justice, and strength. Fear can paralyze, or it can sharpen focus and prepare us for action. The key lies in learning to use the energy without letting it consume you. Let's step into a real example. A manager receives harsh criticism from a supervisor in front of the entire team. One reaction might be snapping back defensively, creating an atmosphere of hostility. Another reaction might be silence, appearing weak, but allowing resentment to fester. Emotional intelligence provides a third path. The manager breathes, acknowledges the sting, and responds calmly. I hear your concern. Perhaps we could discuss specific improvements after this meeting. That single choice transforms the dynamic. What could have been a battle becomes an opportunity for collaboration. Of course, conflict is not limited to professional spaces. Consider a family disagreement. A teenager slams a door, frustrated by rules they see as unfair. A parent's instinct might be to shout louder, to establish authority. But an emotionally wise parent pauses, waits until emotions cool slightly, and then invites conversation. I can see you're upset. Let's talk when you're ready. By shifting from reaction to understanding, the parent opens space for dialogue instead of escalation. Stress, too, challenges EQ in powerful ways. Daily pressures, deadlines, financial worries, constant digital notifications create a background hum of tension that can erupt unexpectedly. In such times, self-awareness helps you recognize when your reserves are running low. Are you snapping at small annoyances? Struggling to concentrate? These are signs to step back, breathe, and reset before stress hijacks your interactions. Another tool for handling high-emotion moments is reframing. Instead of seeing conflict as an attack, see it as data. What is this person's anger telling me about their unmet needs? What does my frustration reveal about my own boundaries? By shifting the lens from blame to curiosity, You turn conflict into insight. It is also worth noting that mastering emotions does not mean erasing them. Some people misunderstand EQ as constant calmness, but true wisdom includes expressing emotions honestly, just not destructively. Anger can be voiced without cruelty. Sadness can be shared without drowning others. Assertiveness can be firm without aggression. Emotional mastery is not silence, but balance. Over time, practicing these skills reshapes the nervous system itself. Neuroscientists have found that consistent mindfulness, reflection, and emotional regulation strengthen the brain's prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision-making, while calming the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm bell. In essence, each time you pause instead of explode, you are rewiring your brain for resilience. Think again of the last time you were in conflict. What did you do? Did you react quickly, only to regret your words later? Or did you pause, breathe, and choose a response aligned with your values? That memory can be your teacher. It reminds you where growth is possible, where practice is needed, and where your EQ journey continues. Handling stress and conflict with emotional wisdom does not make life free of storms, but it does give you an anchor, a way to stay grounded when the winds howl. It transforms challenges into classrooms, conflicts into bridges, and pain into power. And as you learn to manage your own emotions, something remarkable happens. You begin to influence the emotions of others, calming storms around you as well as within you. This leads us naturally into the broader application of emotional intelligence. Once you can steady yourself in tension, the next step is extending that skill outward into leadership, negotiation, and the building of relationships that thrive even under pressure. When we think of leadership, many imagine authority, titles, or the ability to command others. Yet true leadership is not about power, but influence. And influence is born from emotional intelligence. A leader who can read the room, who can sense the unspoken tensions, who knows when to encourage and when to challenge. This is the leader people choose to follow, even when they don't have to. Consider for a moment the image of two different leaders. The first relies on authority alone. They issue orders, demand compliance, and measure success only by numbers and results. People follow because they must, not because they want to. The second leader embodies emotional wisdom. They listen deeply, show empathy when someone struggles, and express confidence in their team's potential. This leader may not always have the loudest voice, but their presence inspires loyalty, commitment, and trust. Which leader leaves a lasting impact? Which one truly changes lives? Emotional intelligence in leadership begins with self-awareness. A leader who recognizes their own triggers avoids projecting insecurity or frustration onto others. Self-regulation prevents rash decisions made in anger or fear. Motivation keeps the leader resilient through setbacks, modeling perseverance for their team. Empathy allows them to understand the struggles and aspirations of those they guide. And social skill ties it all together, creating an environment where collaboration feels natural rather than forced. In negotiation, EQ becomes even more essential. Negotiation is not a cold exchange of numbers. It is a dance of emotions, expectations, and trust. Imagine sitting across a table where both sides want different outcomes. Logic alone might present facts, but facts rarely change minds on their own. People must feel understood before they are willing to compromise. A skilled negotiator listens, acknowledges concerns, and frames solutions in a way that aligns with both logic and emotion. I hear that this deadline feels too tight. Let's explore options that protect your team's workload while still meeting our goals. Such a statement does not weaken your position. It strengthens it by creating mutual respect. Think of a diplomat working to ease international tensions. They must balance firmness with empathy, clarity with flexibility. Their ability to manage their own emotions under intense pressure allows them to communicate effectively even when stakes are high. Without EQ, diplomacy fails. With it, agreements become possible. Now, let us bring this closer to everyday life. Leadership is not limited to executives or politicians. Parents lead children, teachers lead students, friends influence each other. In every case, EQ shapes the outcome. A parent who yells in frustration may get short-term obedience, but a parent who listens and explains fosters trust and long-term respect. A teacher who ridicules a struggling student may crush confidence, but one who encourages with empathy unlocks potential. Even in casual friendships, emotional intelligence matters. A friend who remembers your worries, checks in when you're silent, or celebrates your victories as if they were their own, that is emotional leadership in action. It is not about commanding others, but about uplifting them. Building relationships is one of the most powerful applications of EQ. Humans are wired for connection. We long to be seen, heard, and valued. Emotional intelligence gives us the tools to offer these gifts to others. It teaches us to listen not only for words, but for emotions beneath them, to validate feelings without rushing to judgment, and to resolve conflicts without breaking bonds. Imagine a workplace where people genuinely trust each other. Meetings are not battlegrounds, but brainstorming sessions. Criticism is offered constructively, and disagreements lead to stronger ideas rather than resentment. Such environments don't happen by accident. They are built on the foundation of emotional intelligence. A leader sets the tone, but every member contributes by practicing empathy, regulating emotions, and valuing connection over competition. One of the most overlooked aspects of EQ in relationships is vulnerability. We often think of leaders as unshakable, but in truth, showing vulnerability builds authenticity. When a leader admits, "I don't have all the answers, but I believe in our ability to figure this out together," they create space for trust. Vulnerability signals humanity, and humanity draws people closer. It is also important to recognize that relationships are not free from conflict. Even the strongest bonds face moments of disagreement. Here, emotional intelligence is the glue that holds people together. Instead of letting anger fracture connection, EQ guides us to communicate openly, to seek understanding, and to value the relationship above winning the argument. If you reflect on your own life, you may recall moments when someone's emotional wisdom changed everything. A mentor who encouraged you when you doubted yourself. A partner who listened with patience instead of reacting in frustration. A colleague who helped calm tensions in a meeting. These small moments are the building blocks of trust and connection. The more we practice emotional intelligence in leadership and relationships, the more we realize its power is not limited to grand gestures. It is found in everyday choices. The choice to pause before replying, the choice to listen instead of interrupting, the choice to empathize rather than dismiss. Over time, these choices create bonds strong enough to withstand the storms of life. Having seen how EQ shapes leadership, negotiation, and relationships, we come to the heart of its practice: daily habits. Emotional intelligence is not something we switch on in special moments. It must be lived, trained, and cultivated each day. And so, the next step in our journey is learning how to weave EQ into the fabric of everyday life, turning theory into practice. Emotional intelligence is not a trait you either have or don't have. It is a muscle that strengthens with practice, a discipline that grows with attention. Just as physical fitness requires regular exercise, emotional wisdom requires daily habits. Without practice, our instincts default to reactivity. snapping at stress, withdrawing under pressure, or misreading the signals of those around us. With consistent practice, however, we learn to respond with clarity, empathy, and balance. The first daily practice is simple but profound: pausing. In a world addicted to speed, pausing feels unnatural, even risky. Yet in emotional life, the pause is power. The moment between stimulus and response determines everything. When a colleague sends a sharp email, instead of firing back instantly, you breathe, wait, and respond with clarity. When your child interrupts your work for the 10th time, you notice irritation rising, and you pause before scolding. Each pause is a rehearsal in mastery. Over time, the pause becomes your second nature. The second practice is reflection. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to ask, how did I feel today? How did I act on those feelings? Did I listen deeply to others? Where did I succeed? And where can I improve tomorrow? Journaling's a powerful way to track these reflections. By writing down your emotional experiences, you transform vague moods into tangible lessons. Over time, patterns emerge. You discover triggers, recognize growth, and see how practice shapes progress. A third practice is empathy in action. Many people assume empathy is passive, simply feeling with others. But true empathy is active. It means paying attention to the subtle cues of those around you, asking questions that invite openness, and offering presence when words fall short. Practicing empathy daily might mean looking the barista in the eye and offering a genuine thank you, or noticing when a coworker is unusually quiet and asking, "How are you, really?" These small acts compound into trust and connection. Another essential practice is intentional listening. Too often we listen to reply, not to understand. Emotional wisdom requires the opposite. Put away distractions, give your full attention, and let silence stretch long enough for the other person to feel truly heard. Listening is not only about words, it's about tone, expression, and pauses. Daily practice in listening transforms conversations into opportunities for connection rather than competitions of opinion. The fifth practice is gratitude. It may not seem directly related to EQ, but gratitude shifts your emotional state, softening resentment and opening the door to empathy. When you deliberately notice what you are thankful for, whether it is the kindness of a friend, the comfort of a home, or the resilience you discovered in yourself, you reframe your emotional world. Gratitude doesn't erase difficulties, but it gives you the perspective to face them with balance. Daily EQ practice also involves self-care. When you are exhausted, undernourished, or overwhelmed, your emotional resources drain quickly. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, and moments of rest are not luxuries. They are the foundation of emotional regulation. Think of your emotional intelligence as a reservoir. Without refilling it through self-care, the reservoir runs dry, and even the smallest stress can feel like a flood. Technology offers another opportunity for daily EQ practice: mindfulness in digital life. In a world where notifications demand constant attention, emotional wisdom means choosing when to engage and when to disconnect. Before posting online, pause and ask, am I sharing from clarity or from reactivity? Before scrolling endlessly, ask, what am I feeling right now and what am I avoiding? By bringing awareness into digital spaces, you protect your inner balance and prevent technology from hijacking your emotions. Relationships also offer daily practice. Every interaction is a chance to strengthen EQ. Instead of reacting defensively to criticism, ask for clarification. Instead of assuming someone's intent, check in gently. Instead of hiding your own emotions, share them honestly but respectfully. Over time, these micro decisions shape a life where trust, empathy, and resilience become natural. One of the most powerful daily practices is shifting from reaction to intention. Reaction is automatic, driven by habit and impulse. Intention is chosen, aligned with values and purpose. Each morning, you might set a simple intention. Today, I will respond with patience. Throughout the day, that intention becomes a compass, reminding you to choose your highest self in moments of difficulty. Daily practice is not about perfection. You will still lose your temper, misread someone, or fall into old patterns. But each time you return to awareness, pause, reflect, and try again, you grow stronger. Emotional intelligence is not measured by never failing. It is measured by how quickly you notice, recover, and realign. Think of EQ practice like tending a garden. You cannot control the weather, but you can cultivate the soil, water the plants, and pull the weeds. Some days the sun shines, other days storms come. But with consistent care, the garden flourishes. In the same way, daily habits cultivate the emotional garden of your life. As we practice these skills each day, something remarkable happens. We no longer see emotions as obstacles, but as guides. We no longer see relationships as burdens, but as opportunities. And we no longer see ourselves as victims of circumstance, but as active shapers of our inner world. And so, as we close this section, remember, emotional intelligence is not a switch you flip on during crises. It is a way of being you strengthen daily. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And once it becomes natural, you carry emotional wisdom into every corner of your life. Now that we have explored daily practice, let us step further. How do these habits transform us in the real world of challenges, leadership, and relationships? To answer, we will look deeper into how EQ builds not just personal mastery, but a life of influence, resilience, and connection. Empathy is often spoken of as the heart of emotional intelligence, and for good reason. While awareness and regulation help us manage ourselves, empathy allows us to bridge the gap between our inner world and the inner world of another. It is the quiet skill of stepping outside of our own perspective long enough to feel what someone else might be experiencing. Without empathy, conversations remain shallow and relationships remain fragile. With it, connection deepens and trust grows strong. Consider a moment when someone truly saw you, not just your words, but your unspoken emotions. Perhaps you were struggling silently, and a friend placed a hand on your shoulder saying, "I can tell something's heavy on your mind." That small act, born from empathy, can feel like a lifeline. It reminds us that we are not alone, that our inner world is visible and valued. Empathy does not erase pain, but it makes pain bearable because it is shared. Daily empathy begins with attention. Most of us listen half-heartedly, already forming our replies or drifting into our own concerns. But true empathy asks us to pause, look closely, and hear not just the words, but the tone, the pauses, and the silences. Empathy means noticing the slight slump of shoulders, the forced smile, or the edge in a voice. These signals are invitations to look deeper. Yet empathy is not only about noticing, it is about responding. When someone shares frustration, empathy does not rush to fix the problem with advice. It says, "That sounds really difficult. I can see why you're upset." When someone expresses joy, empathy celebrates alongside them, saying, "That's amazing. I'm so glad that happened for you." In both sorrow and joy, empathy reflects back understanding, strengthening the bond between people. In workplaces, empathy transforms culture. Imagine a manager who sees an employee struggling with deadlines. Instead of scolding, they ask, "Is there something making this harder for you right now?" That simple question shifts the dynamic from blame to support. The employee feels seen, and often, performance improves not because of pressure, but because of trust. Leaders who practice empathy create teams that are loyal, collaborative, and motivated. In families, empathy is the glue that holds generations together. Parents who practice empathy with their children teach them not only how to feel, but how to value the feelings of others. Instead of dismissing a child's tears as dramatic, an empathetic parent says, "I can see you're disappointed. It hurts when things don't go the way we hoped." Such responses teach children that their emotions are valid and that they can trust their caregivers with their hearts. Empathy also requires courage. It is easier to turn away from someone's pain than to sit with it. It is easier to judge another's anger than to ask what wound lies beneath it. But courage invites us to lean in rather than retreat. When a friend grieves, we may feel helpless, unsure of what to say. Yet often, the most empathetic act is not words but presence, sitting quietly, offering a hand, letting silence speak louder than platitudes. Of course, empathy can also be exhausting if not balanced with boundaries. Absorbing the emotions of others without care for your own well-being can lead to burnout. Emotional wisdom lies in practicing empathy with strength, caring deeply, but not drowning. Boundaries allow us to help without losing ourselves, to walk alongside someone without carrying their entire burden. Empathy extends beyond individuals to communities and even to society as a whole. When we empathize with people different from ourselves, those with different backgrounds, cultures, or beliefs, we expand our circle of humanity. Prejudice shrinks, compassion grows, and dialogue replaces division. The world's greatest movements for justice have always been fueled by empathy. The ability to imagine another's suffering and to say, "This must change." Practicing empathy daily does not require grand gestures. It may mean pausing before judging, asking one more question, or offering one more moment of patience. It may mean checking in with a coworker. "How are you really doing?" Or remembering to celebrate someone else's success without comparison. Over time, these simple acts create ripples that strengthen every connection in your life. Empathy also opens the door to forgiveness. When you can see the fear, insecurity, or hurt that drives someone's harsh behavior, it becomes easier to let go of resentment. Forgiveness does not excuse harm, but it frees you from carrying anger endlessly. To forgive is often an act of empathy, seeing the wounded human behind the wound they inflicted. And so, as empathy grows, life itself begins to feel different. Conflicts soften because you seek to understand, not to win. Relationships deepen because you offer space for honesty. And even strangers feel less like obstacles and more like fellow travelers on the same journey. Empathy is not weakness. It is strength dressed in gentleness. It is the courage to feel with another, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is uncomfortable. And as you practice it, you discover that the heart has a wisdom the mind alone can never achieve. Now that we have explored the daily practice of empathy, we move naturally toward its extension, the way it shapes not just understanding, but the building of long-lasting, resilient relationships. Relationships are the mirrors in which our emotional intelligence is reflected. No matter how self-aware or disciplined we believe ourselves to be, it is within the context of other people that our EQ is tested and revealed. Friendships, partnerships, family ties, and professional networks all depend on our ability to connect, repair, and nurture bonds. And while love or affection may spark a relationship, it is emotional wisdom that sustains it. Think of the people in your life whose presence you trust deeply. They are not perfect, nor are they free from flaws. What makes them safe to you is not their perfection, but their ability to listen, to acknowledge your feelings, and to stand with you even when disagreements arise. That safety is built on emotional intelligence, on the willingness to understand and value emotions as much as facts. At the heart of building lasting relationships is trust. Trust does not appear overnight. It is built through consistency. The small daily choices to keep promises, to listen sincerely, and to respond with care rather than judgment. Emotional intelligence strengthens trust by making us aware of how our actions affect others. When we choose words carefully in moments of tension, when we admit mistakes with humility, we show that the relationship matters more than ego. Over time, these choices become the invisible threads that weave connection into something resilient. Communication is another cornerstone. Without EQ, communication often breaks down into arguments or misunderstandings. One person speaks only to be heard, while the other prepares a counterpoint. With EQ, communication transforms into dialogue. We listen not only to words, but to emotions beneath them. We ask clarifying questions rather than assuming. We pause when frustration rises, choosing not to escalate. These habits create a space where people feel safe to share openly, knowing they will be met with respect rather than dismissal. Conflict, though uncomfortable, is inevitable in any deep relationship. Many fear it, imagining that conflict signals failure. But in truth, conflict, handled wisely, strengthens bonds. Emotional intelligence reframes conflict from a battle to a bridge. Instead of seeing the other as an enemy, you see them as a partner in finding resolution. You seek not to win, but to understand. Arguments become opportunities to clarify needs, to reset boundaries, and to rediscover common ground. Couples who navigate disagreements with empathy and calmness often emerge stronger than those who avoid conflict altogether. One of the most powerful skills in relationships is forgiveness. No matter how much we love one another, hurt will happen, sometimes by accident, sometimes through weakness. Emotional intelligence enables forgiveness by helping us see beyond the wound to the wounded person. It asks us to acknowledge our own pain honestly, but also to consider the emotions and struggles of the one who hurt us. Forgiveness does not erase harm, but it releases the grip of resentment, allowing the relationship to heal instead of harden. Another expression of EQ in relationships is celebration. It is easy to empathize with someone suffering, but just as important is the ability to share in their joy. Envy and comparison often poison friendships and partnerships, but emotional intelligence teaches us to genuinely celebrate others' victories. When a colleague earns recognition, when a friend achieves a goal, emotionally wise people cheer wholeheartedly, knowing that joy shared multiplies. Social intelligence, the outward expression of EQ, becomes particularly valuable in building communities. Whether at work, in families, or in circles of friends, people with strong social intelligence sense group dynamics, resolve tensions before they escalate, and bring people together. They are the ones who make others feel included, who encourage the shy voice in a meeting, who diffuse awkwardness with humor or kindness. These small acts build an atmosphere where relationships flourish. But lasting relationships are not built only on empathy and kindness. They require boundaries. Emotional wisdom includes knowing where you end and another begins. Without boundaries, empathy can become enabling, and connection can turn into codependency. Boundaries allow you to love without losing yourself, to give without resentment, and to receive without guilt. They protect the integrity of both individuals while preserving the bond between them. Perhaps you can think of a relationship in your own life where EQ has played a role. Maybe it was a friend who forgave you when you made a mistake, showing empathy instead of judgment. Maybe it was a partner who listened during an argument, calming the storm with patience. Or perhaps it was you, choosing to pause before reacting, choosing to understand rather than condemn. These are the quiet victories of emotional intelligence, the choices that sustain connection when words alone cannot. As we look at relationships through the lens of EQ, one truth becomes clear. Emotional wisdom is not about removing difficulty, but about transforming it. Disagreements become opportunities for growth. Vulnerability becomes a source of intimacy. Boundaries become signs of respect. And over time, relationships built on EQ endure not because they are free of storms, but because they have anchors strong enough to withstand them. Now, having seen how EQ strengthens our connections with others, it is time to return to the crucible of conflict itself. For even the strongest relationships face moments of sharp disagreement and emotional intensity. The next step in our journey is learning how to stay calm in the very heart of conflict, turning emotional storms into pathways for deeper growth. Conflict is often painted as something to fear, a force that cracks relationships and unsettles peace. Yet conflict is also inevitable, and at times, necessary. It arises when values clash, when needs go unmet, or when misunderstandings pile up. The difference between conflict that destroys and conflict that transforms lies not in the intensity of the disagreement, but in how we respond to it. Here is where emotional intelligence proves its deepest worth, guiding us to remain steady in the storm, to turn arguments into understanding, and to allow tension to be the catalyst for growth. Think of a heated moment. Voices rise, body language hardens, and the atmosphere thickens with tension. Perhaps it is at work, where deadlines and stress ignite tempers, or at home, where years of unspoken frustration suddenly spill out. In such moments, IQ alone is powerless. Facts cannot calm anger. Logic cannot dissolve hurt. But EQ can. The ability to stay calm, to breathe through the fire, to listen with empathy even as your own emotions stir. That is emotional wisdom in its purest form. The first step in handling conflict with EQ is self-regulation. When emotions run high, your nervous system reacts instinctively. Faster heartbeat, shallow breathing, and a mind primed for defense or attack. By recognizing these signals, you can choose to pause. Even a few seconds of silence can interrupt escalation. This pause allows you to ask, what do I truly want from this conversation? Do I want to win, or do I want resolution? That simple question redirects the energy from combat to collaboration. Next comes listening. In conflict, most people listen only to rebut, not to understand. Emotional intelligence demands the opposite. It asks us to hear the emotions beneath the words. A colleague's anger may hide fear of being overlooked. A partner's sharp words may mask exhaustion or vulnerability. By listening with empathy, you turn accusations into opportunities for discovery. You might respond, "It sounds like you feel unsupported. Am I hearing you right?" Such words diffuse tension because they show care instead of competition. Reframing is another powerful tool. Instead of seeing conflict as a personal attack, view it as information. Ask yourself, what need is not being met here? What values are colliding? This shift moves the focus from blame to problem solving. Two people arguing about chores, for example, may actually be clashing over respect and fairness. By identifying the deeper issue, solutions become clearer and less personal. Staying calm in conflict also means managing tone and body language. Anger delivered with a clenched jaw and raised voice fuels defensiveness. The same message, spoken firmly but calmly, invites dialogue. Emotional intelligence teaches us that how we communicate often matters more than what we communicate. Softening posture, lowering tone, and maintaining steady eye contact can transform the atmosphere instantly. Consider an example. Two business partners disagree on the direction of their company. One feels urgency to take risks, while the other values stability. The discussion grows heated. Without EQ, the conversation collapses into accusations. You're reckless. You're holding us back. But with EQ, they pause, breathe, and reframe. I hear that you want growth, and I value security. How can we design a plan that honors both? Suddenly, the conflict becomes a creative dialogue rather than a destructive fight. In personal relationships, EQ and conflict is equally vital. Imagine a married couple arguing over finances. One partner feels anxious about security, while the other craves freedom to spend. Instead of escalating, an emotionally intelligent approach might sound like, I know money worries you, and I want us both to feel safe. Let's create a budget that gives us stability and also space for enjoyment. This blend of empathy and problem-solving strengthens trust instead of eroding it. Of course, staying calm in conflict does not mean avoiding truth. Emotional wisdom is not passive. It is courageous. It means speaking honestly, but with respect. It means saying, I feel hurt when, instead of you always make me. By owning emotions rather than projecting blame, we keep conversations constructive. Sometimes, the wisest choice in conflict is to step back. Not all battles need immediate resolution. Cooling off allows emotions to settle, making it easier to return with clarity. Emotional intelligence gives you permission to say, this is important, but I need time to think before we continue. Far from avoiding the issue, this signals responsibility and respect. Over time, practicing EQ in conflict creates resilience in relationships. People learn that disagreements are not threats, but opportunities. They trust that even when storms come, the bond will hold. And they discover that conflict, handled with calmness and empathy, often deepens intimacy rather than weakens it. The truth is, conflict is a classroom. It teaches us about ourselves, our triggers, our fears, our needs. It teaches us about others, their values, their wounds, their hopes. And with emotional intelligence as our guide, it teaches us that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to navigate it with wisdom. Now that we have explored staying calm in conflict, we are ready to move outward once again, to see how these skills expand into leadership, negotiation, and influence. For it is one thing to master conflict in personal life, but another to lead others through storms with empathy and strength. That is the mark of emotional wisdom in its fullest form. Leadership is often imagined as standing at the front of a room, issuing commands or holding authority over others. Yet the leaders who shape history and inspire loyalty rarely rely on power alone. What sets them apart is emotional intelligence, the ability to guide not only minds but hearts, to manage not only tasks but trust. A leader without EQ may achieve compliance, but a leader with EQ inspires commitment. And the difference between the two is the difference between momentary success and lasting impact. At its core, leadership with emotional intelligence begins with presence. People do not follow titles, they follow people. A leader who listens deeply, notices unspoken tensions, and acknowledges the humanity of their team creates an atmosphere where others feel valued. When someone feels seen, they are more willing to contribute their best. This is not manipulation, it is alignment, bringing out the highest potential in people by meeting their emotional needs as well as their professional ones. Negotiation is another arena where EQ becomes indispensable. Many imagine negotiation as a battle of wills, but in truth, it is a process of understanding. Facts and figures are necessary, but emotions often determine outcomes. Consider two parties debating a contract. One side may appear stubborn, but beneath their resistance lies fear. Fear of being exploited, fear of overcommitment, fear of loss. An emotionally intelligent negotiator sees beyond the surface, acknowledging those fears without conceding their own goals. They might say, "I understand that deadlines feel tight. Let's explore what flexibility might ease the pressure while still achieving the core objective." Such language creates cooperation, where hard logic alone might create stalemate. History offers countless examples of emotionally wise leaders. Nelson Mandela, after decades of imprisonment, chose reconciliation over revenge. His ability to empathize even with former oppressors transformed a nation. His leadership was not rooted in intellectual brilliance alone, though he had plenty of that, but in the ability to sense the emotional needs of a wounded people and respond with wisdom. Similarly, great negotiators throughout time, from diplomats to business leaders, succeed because they recognize that beneath every position lies an emotion waiting to be understood. Within organizations, EQ in leadership builds cultures that thrive. A manager who explodes in frustration may get short-term compliance, but over time they breed fear and disengagement. A manager with EQ, however, communicates expectations clearly, handles stress without projecting it, and addresses mistakes with both firmness and fairness. Their teams feel safe enough to innovate, to share ideas, and to admit when they are struggling. This safety fuels growth and creativity. Emotional intelligence in leadership also means knowing yourself well enough to lead authentically. People can sense when a leader hides behind a mask, pretending to be infallible. Authenticity, by contrast, builds trust. When a leader admits, "I don't have all the answers, but I believe we can figure this out together," it does not weaken authority, it strengthens it. Vulnerability, wisely shared, invites collaboration. It signals that leadership is not about being above others, but walking alongside them. Negotiation and leadership also share one more truth. Emotions are contagious. The calmness or panic of a leader spreads quickly. In a tense meeting, if the leader remains composed, others mirror that composure. If the leader spirals into anger or fear, chaos follows. Emotional intelligence equips leaders to manage not only their own emotions, but the emotional climate of entire groups. By choosing calm, empathy, and optimism, leaders set the tone that others adopt. In personal life, the same principle applies. Whether leading a family through a difficult transition, guiding a community project, or mediating between friends, emotionally intelligent leadership transforms outcomes. It shifts focus from domination to cooperation, from winning to understanding. Leadership is not about control. It is about service, about creating conditions where others can flourish. Perhaps you have experienced such leadership yourself. Maybe it was a teacher who encouraged you to believe in yourself when you doubted. Maybe it was a mentor who challenged you firmly, but always with care. Or perhaps you recall a leader whose lack of EQ created tension, fear, and disengagement. These experiences remind us that leadership is not neutral. It shapes lives in powerful ways. As we reflect on EQ in leadership and negotiation, one truth becomes undeniable. Success is rarely about being the smartest in the room. It is about being the most emotionally attuned. Knowledge can win arguments, but only wisdom can win hearts. And in the long run, it is hearts, not arguments, that sustain teams, families, and communities. Having explored leadership and negotiation, we now turn to the practical heart of emotional intelligence, the everyday habits that transform awareness into mastery. For EQ is not proven only in grand speeches or tense negotiations, but in the quiet moments of daily life where emotions rise and choices matter. Emotional intelligence reaches its fullest expression not in theories, not in titles, not even in the moments of crisis, but in the rhythm of everyday life. The true test of EQ is how we show up each morning, how we respond to small frustrations, how we connect in casual conversations, and how we carry ourselves when no one is watching. It is in the ordinary that emotional wisdom becomes extraordinary. The daily practice of EQ begins with awareness the moment you wake. Before reaching for your phone, pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? It may be grogginess, excitement, dread, or calm. By naming your emotion, you set the tone for the day. This awareness is like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly you can see where you are, and that clarity shapes your choices. Throughout the day, small moments offer countless opportunities to strengthen EQ. A stranger cuts you off in traffic. Do you honk in anger or breathe and let it pass? A coworker interrupts you during a meeting. Do you snap or do you gently reclaim your space? A friend cancels plans at the last minute. Do you stew in resentment or ask if they're okay? Each of these moments is a chance to practice. Each choice becomes a brick in the foundation of your emotional wisdom. One of the most practical ways to cultivate EQ daily is through reflection. At the close of each day, take 5 minutes to replay your interactions. Ask yourself, when did I react with wisdom? When did I let emotions control me? What can I do differently tomorrow? This gentle self-audit, free of harsh judgment, turns every day into a classroom. Over time, patterns emerge. You learn your triggers, you see your progress, and you gain confidence that EQ is not abstract, it is growing in you day by day. Another practice is intentional gratitude. Begin or end each day by naming 3 things you are thankful for. Gratitude shifts your emotional state, making it easier to regulate impulses and empathize with others. A grateful mind is less reactive, more resilient. Even in hardship, gratitude provides perspective, reminding us that life holds both pain and beauty, and that wisdom lies in holding them together. Relationships, too, become daily practice grounds for EQ. Each conversation is an invitation to listen more deeply, to validate rather than dismiss, to encourage rather than criticize. Emotional wisdom is not found in grand declarations, but in the way you greet a partner at the end of the day, the patience you extend to a child learning something new, or the kindness you show to a colleague under stress. These ordinary acts accumulate into extraordinary bonds. Mindfulness also plays a role. Emotional intelligence thrives when we bring presence to the moment. Too often we move through life on autopilot, lost in thought or distracted by devices. Practicing mindfulness, whether through meditation, walking in silence, or simply paying attention to your breath, anchors you in the present. It sharpens awareness of both your own emotions and those of others, allowing you to respond with clarity rather than habit. And perhaps the most vital daily practice is compassion toward others and toward yourself. Many people extend empathy outward but neglect themselves, berating their own mistakes and bottling their own pain. Self-compassion reminds you that being human means stumbling. When you treat yourself with the same kindness you offer others, you free yourself from cycles of shame and create space for growth. These habits, awareness, reflection, gratitude, mindfulness, compassion, are not complicated. Yet their power lies in consistency. Practiced once, they shift a moment. Practiced daily, they reshape a life. Over time, EQ becomes less of a skill you practice and more of a way of being. You begin to notice emotions the way a sailor notices changes in the wind, not as threats, but as signals. You regulate impulses not through force, but through habit. You empathize not because you remind yourself to, but because it has become natural. And so, as we bring this journey to a close, remember this. The path of emotional wisdom is not linear. There will be days you lose patience, days you misread someone, days you feel overwhelmed. That does not mean you have failed. It means you are practicing. Each stumble is another lesson, another chance to pause, breathe, and begin again. The person who is emotionally wise is not flawless, but faithful. Faithful to the practice of noticing, faithful to the courage of listening, faithful to the daily choice of connection over isolation. Over time, such faithfulness shapes not only your inner world, but the lives of those around you. Emotional intelligence is not a destination. It is a lifelong journey. And with each step you take, each pause, each breath, each act of empathy, you become not only more effective, but more human. So I invite you now, as we conclude, to carry these practices into your own life. Begin with one pause, one reflection, one act of empathy today. Let tomorrow build on it. In time, you will find that EQ is not something you achieve, but something you live, something that flows naturally from you into the world. And as it does, you will discover the truth. The wisest people are not those who know the most, but those who feel deeply, connect sincerely, and act with emotional wisdom in every corner of life. We have walked together through the landscape of emotional intelligence, from understanding its importance beyond IQ, to exploring its 5 pillars, to practicing it in moments of stress, conflict, leadership, and daily life. What emerges is a simple yet profound truth. IQ may measure how fast your mind can work, but EQ measures how deeply your heart can connect. And in the long arc of life, connection outlasts calculation. Think back to the beginning of this journey. We contrasted the brilliant mind that falters in relationships with the steady presence of someone whose wisdom lies in empathy, regulation, and connection. That contrast is not theoretical. It is real, visible in workplaces, families, and communities everywhere. Time and again, those with emotional wisdom rise, not because they dominate, but because they inspire. The 5 pillars, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill, are the architecture of EQ. Each is vital, each supports the others. Together, they form a foundation on which relationships, careers, and lives can flourish. Without them, success feels hollow. With them, even ordinary lives shine with extraordinary richness. We have also seen that EQ is most visible in moments of pressure. When conflicts flare, when stress surges, when negotiations grow tense, this is when the work of practice pays off. To stay calm, to listen, to reframe, to seek resolution rather than victory, these are the marks of emotional wisdom. Such choices ripple outward, shaping not only outcomes, but also the emotional climate of entire families, teams, and communities. Perhaps the most important lesson is that EQ is not fixed. It is not a gift granted to a lucky few, but a skill that can be cultivated by anyone willing to practice. Each pause, each reflection, each act of empathy strengthens the muscle. Each day offers chances to try again, to grow, to become more. So ask yourself, how do you respond when criticized? Do you listen deeply when others speak? Do you pause before you react? Your answers reveal your current EQ, but they do not define your future EQ. Every moment is a chance to build. The emotionally wise person is not perfect. They are human, sometimes failing, sometimes struggling. But they are also committed. Committed to noticing, to learning, to connecting. Their strength lies not in avoiding mistakes, but in recovering quickly, forgiving freely, and returning to empathy again and again. This is the invitation of emotional intelligence, to live not only with sharp minds, but with open hearts. To measure success not only by what we achieve, but by how we uplift those around us. To remember that true intelligence is not only about solving problems, but about nurturing people. So let us close here with one final encouragement. Begin today. Listen more carefully. Pause before reacting. Celebrate someone else's success. Offer forgiveness where resentment lingers. And above all, extend to yourself the compassion you so readily extend to others. The journey of emotional wisdom is lifelong, but every step is worth it. For the more you grow in EQ, the more you become aligned with the deepest truth of life, that we are meant not only to think, but to feel, to connect, and to love wisely.